back to the Which Carolina podcast. This is Lee Branscombe, and I am here with a terrific guest at Mavs Draft on Twitter, aka Richard Stayman, aka one of the legendary guys of kind of the underbelly of NBA Draft Twitter. Have really enjoyed knowing you from afar on the Twitter machine. Now we get a chance to actually talk face to face, and I appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, dude, I'm really excited to be here. Likewise, seeing you around as well. Like you're a pretty prominent figure on there too. Don't discount yourself on there.
Well, I appreciate that. It's been fun, man. Like as we were talking about kind of right before we jumped on, it was my first year kind of diving into NBA Draft Twitter, and I've been like super pumped about not only just all the smart people in there. Like there are some incredibly intelligent NBA Draft Twitter guys, and just like how broad the ecosystem is. I don't think I realized what a kind of massive deal it is, honestly.
Yeah, I mean it's huge. I started up in 2017, so like it's
Yep.
grown a lot over the last 3.5 years. It's completely different.
So that's kind of the perfect way to transition into the intro here. How did you get started on the Mavs draft Twitter thing? What was the impetus to that? Have you always been a huge college basketball NBA draft fan? Just give me kind of the rundown on how y'all got rolling.
Yeah, so it starts in 1999, so it goes way back. That's how I learned to read was literally by reading the transaction reports and things like that.
Totally.
So I started young. It was the first thing I can really remember reading was B.J. Armstrong retired, and so it's
Amazing.
super obscure. And then like 2003, obviously the legendary draft. After that, I kind of wanted to keep up because I'm also a Magic fan. I'm from Orlando originally.
Okay.
Dwight Howard, the Magic had the number one pick, and I still remember him or Rebecca Okafor and and I like looked it up as a 10-year-old, and 10-year-olds can only do so much. And from there on, like every draft I just tuned in. It was so exciting to me. I liked seeing the future. It felt like I was predicting the future,
Yep.
by kind of keeping up. And then fast forward to 2017 when I was in college in my in the basement library, I was like the quiet floor. I was like, I have this idea, like I really want to tweet about it. And my at the time girlfriend, like all of her friends followed me on Twitter. I'm like, these people don't care. Like, and I was like, I need something like that's just for basketball. Like, I'll just create an account, whatever, see where it takes me. And I wrote about, like, obsessively wrote about Donovan Mitchell being the pick that the Mavs need to target, him and Malik Monk. So I wasn't all perfect there, but and from there on, like, it kind of just stuck, and just been rolling with it ever since.
That's awesome, man. Well, as our listeners will know, as a Charlotte Hornets guy, you mentioned two guys there that we didn't really have a chance to get Dwight, but we did in the lottery. And then we ended up number two, ended up with a Mecca, who was a solid player, obviously. But, the Hornets we have our fair share of lottery bad luck, missing out on Anthony Davis, all that stuff. But I was pumped about Malik Monk at the time because I felt he had fallen down the board a little bit. But then, of course, hindsight's 2020. Like Donovan Mitchell was also sitting right there. But we've all got our good wins and losses on kind of predictions. So that's pretty cool that the Donovan Mitchell thing was kind of what catapulted you into the environment. And everyone's like, all right, this guy might know what he's talking about.
Yeah, it was weird, and people still like put that label on me, and I'm like, all right, yes, I got that right, which is cool and all, but like, I mean, I've gotten other things right. Move on to like past 2017,
Yeah, yeah,
and just
yeah.
hope that they don't notice that like I had Malik Monk second on my board. But
Hey, I'm still holding some Malik Monk stock, man. We'll see how this year will be
yeah,
interesting because obviously the way he plays will dictate maybe what an extension may or may not look like. I think that's honestly one of the underrated storylines for the Hornets this season is what Malik Monk's future will be. But we are here to talk not only Mavericks but also some 2021 NBA draft talk. I just kind of wanted to set you up in regards to what the last 3 years broadly have looked like for the Mavericks. So 17, 18, 24 wins. And then that summer is obviously another franchise changing moment where they trade, was it 5 and 11 for three?
it was 5 and the 2020 pick, or I'm sorry, 2019.
Right, which ended up being Cam Reddish, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so basically Trae Young and Cam Reddish for Luka Doncic, which Trae's terrific. Cam Reddish is showing promise, but obviously, I mean, that's a trade that'll probably go down in history as altering for both franchises. So get Luka that summer, 2018-19, 33 wins. So a decent little tick up in his rookie year, winning 9 more games. And then 19-20 this past season is really when Luka starts to kind of truly ascend into his just heliocentric on the ball engine, creating a historically efficient offense. Mavs win 43 games in a short season. They're 7th in the West. How have you just kind of consumed this ascension of Luka and also the pieces around him,
Yeah, it's been a really fun adventure to watch. Like I feel lucky to be able to see him play. So I didn't get to see Dirk's ascension as well. Like I mean, I
Right.
was under 10 for most of it. It's been incredible. The Mavs have done a really good job of just getting the right role players around him, and like even for the past few years, especially I think this offseason, I think it's been even better. But they've just done such a good job of surrounding him with the right talent. Dorian Finney-Smith has really improved his jump shot. That's been an absolutely massive development for the Mavs. His defense has always been there, but the 3-point shot was always inconsistent until this last season. And Luka set him up with his best shot, which is the corner 3.
Yep.
So they've done a really good job of getting him guys like that. I do think losing Seth Curry this year will hurt, but they make up for it in other ways.
Totally. So kind of what I alluded to, the Mavericks were first in offensive efficiency, offensive rating in the NBA last year, and I believe was the number 1 offensive rating of all time in the NBA.
Yep.
They were 18th in defensive rating, which isn't horrific, but obviously was a weaker part, on that side of the court for the Mavericks. Has there been anything, to go back to Luka just for a second, is there any part of his game that has surprised you with how quickly he's developed, or is this kind of what you expected?
I never expected an MVP caliber season in his second year. Like someone, obviously not the MVP, but like getting votes for MVP.
Yep.
Nobody expected that. I expected him to tone it down a little bit from what actually happened. The thing that surprises me the most, honestly, is just how easily he gets to the rim and
Yep.
finishes there. I don't even have words for it. He's just so creative, and he knows how to use his disadvantages to his advantage. He's so smart, and it's mind blowing to me, honestly.
It really is. I think, I mean, look, even casual NBA fans, I think during this past 19-20 regular season started to realize how incredibly talented and efficient he was, and that he was now like truly impacting winning in a big way in the West. But I think for kind of just the broader casual NBA, nationwide fanhood, the Clippers series this offseason is really what pushed him into the massive spotlight that he deserves to be in. One play for me that you'll probably remember, I don't remember which game it was, but it was late in a game, and he just completely bullied Kawhi Leonard all the way under the rim, threw his shoulder into his chest, and laid the ball in. And I was just like, oh man, like Kawhi Leonard, obviously one of the premier defenders in the world, and Luka was just having his way with him. I mean, it didn't really matter what the Clippers did to him scheme wise. He was able to figure it out. And I think that's, to your point, like just how cerebral he is probably the most impressive part, even though there are a ton of other things you could highlight too.
Right. And it's just, I mean, like you said, Kawhi Leonard is not exactly somebody that's easily beaten off the dribble or anything like that. It's things like the angles he takes, when he takes them, how he takes them. It's an incredible combination. I really don't know how many slashers in the NBA have it. Like there's the premier guys. I mean, DeMar DeRozan has it.
Yep.
LeBron has it. Luka has it. That might be the list.
Yep. It's incredible. All right, so I think we've done Luka his service there. I was curious on kind of your thoughts, and just I imagine that's been a really fun ride to watch his development. So you alluded to some of the key departures. So obviously Seth Curry is one of the best shooters in the NBA right now. Talk about a guy who's just grinded and developed and became a real rotational NBA player on good teams. Courtney Lee, DeLon Wright. do we need to do an ode to JJ Barea real quick?
Oh man, JJ was a staple of my like teenage years as a
Yep.
Mavs fan. So I poured one out. I really hope he doesn't. I mean, like selfishly, I hope he just comes to the Mavs as an assistant. I don't want to see him play somewhere else again. Like the Minnesota years were tough. I don't need to see it again. But if he wants to be happy, I won't
Well,
stop him.
and his role in that championship, he's a made man. He's a legend for all time. And I literally made a note in the show notes. I was like, we got to hit on JJ real quick because I know what he means to Mavs fans, and deservingly so. The only other departure that I really think was worth mentioning, MKG moved on. Key additions, though, James Johnson, Josh Richardson came over in the Seth Curry trade. Wesley Iwundu, Dwight Powell coming back from injury, I think is kind of an underrated storyline. Jalen Brunson as well. And then, of course, the batch of rookies, Josh Smith at 18, Tyrell Terry at 31, and Tyler Bay at 36. It felt like, and I'll be curious on your thoughts, it felt like the Mavs realized we've got to have a little bit more two-way wing depth around Luka. And although they might have sacrificed a little bit of shooting with Seth just because he is such an elite, efficient shooter, it feels like they added a ton of athletic two-way depth on the wing that I guess my point is like they can throw more bodies at the Kawhis and the Paul George types that they didn't quite have before. Is that something did that shock you that they brought in that many guys? Did you see it that way, at least from a structural strategy standpoint?
Yeah, especially after the two Joshes. Like after Josh Green, I was like, awesome, they're all in on defense now. This is a big upside pick. And then they traded for Josh Richardson, like sacrificed, their best shooter for him. And I was like, okay, wow, they're like really into it. And then they drafted Tyler Bay like a minute later, who, I mean, like I think we both were pretty high on his defense, like Pac-12 Player of the Year, Defense Player of the Year, excuse me. And I mean, dude, even their two ways, like they got Nate Hinton on a two-way, who is a dog on defense. Like they've gone all in. They've gone absolutely all in on defense. And it's very obvious Luka wanted that because it just makes his job easier. Like in the bubble, he was playing good defense. And there's honestly no reason we should be saying that. Like he should always be guarding the worst defender, just save this energy for offense. It does so much. And like you said, they have ammo. That's what they have now. All right, Josh Green can't stop him. Tyler Bay, go do your thing. Like it's just next man up. And I love that they can do that and they can switch if it's not just like, like you get the Clippers, you can't afford to have just one. That's really what did them in. Like it was very obvious. Like even though Paul George played horribly, you still need someone who can stay in front of Paul George. And a lot of guys on the Mavs couldn't during the bubble.
Yeah, and now, I mean, I think Josh Richardson is a pretty underrated defender. Wesley Iwundu, it'll be interesting to see. Like he's a terrific defender. It'll be interesting to see if he can hold water on offense enough to stay in the rotation. I think they've got a lot of kind of rotational flexibility now too. Like you mentioned Dorian Finney-Smith earlier, he can play multi-positional basketball. James Johnson can play a little bit of multi-positional basketball. Josh Green. So let's talk about the draft picks for a second. This is one of those situations, and I would compare it to kind of Precious Achiuwa in Miami. Three guys that I wasn't necessarily higher on than the consensus, but that now in retrospect, I just love the fit so much that I think that they have a much better chance of succeeding. And honestly, I feel that way about all three guys. So Josh Green is just kind of a home run in terms of throwing darts at like the two-way wing dartboard talent, and, it'll be, look, you can never really depend on rookies right away, especially defensively, but he shows so much on-ball defensive upside. I thought that made a ton of sense. I feel like Tyrell Terry is kind of their long-term solution to hopefully replacing a little bit of what Seth Curry did. And then you already talked about Tyler Bay as like a two-way defensive wing. Do you feel like Josh Green is the best bet to contribute right away? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, if I had to bet on like one of them making the all-rookie team, I'd probably go with Tyrell Terry, which is weird because I think he was the one who I was I mean, technically Tyler Bay was my lowest ranking.
Yep.
I saw a lot of draft Twitter like way too high on Tyrell Terry. I think who was it, Kevin O'Connor, that had him top 10,
Yeah.
and it kind of left a sour taste in my mouth. And I was like, and I think it unfairly made me judge him just because of it. And it's obviously the wrong way to do that. But when you look at team, like you said, when you look at where a guy lands, that really does change a lot. I mean, if you
Totally.
put Tyrell Terry in just another system, I can't even. He fits
Sacramento
actually
or
a lot.
something.
Sacramento, yeah, that's a great one. Like you think of him a lot less because of the fit, and that's a real thing. Like I think Josh Green was perfect. I do think he is the safest bet though to contribute early. I think for the first 5 games you really don't see him much. After that, you see their defense kind of iffy, and then he's going to come in and the defense changes. But long term, I think you're going to see Tyrell Terry get the most volume.
Yeah.
Does that kind of make sense?
No, that makes total sense. And look, I mean, Luka continues to need shooting around him. So although they did a terrific job kind of accumulating just a lot of, like I said, two-way wing depth that can guard and that can make shots to a degree. I think you're right. I think you will see Tyrell Terry some just because he offers a little bit of a different dynamic. Obviously he's a decent instinctual defender in regards to like getting in passing lanes and things like that. He's not quite there yet physically, of course, and he can kind of fall asleep and lose shooters at times. But I think the point I'm trying to make is they did such a good job of acquiring defensive talent. I think Tyrell Terry can kind of be that counter option to, all right, let's throw a little bit more shooting out there in this certain lineup or whatever. So I'm fascinated to see how him and Josh Green can maybe work their way into the rotation on a really talented roster, frankly.
Yeah, and if there was ever a coach to hide a negative defender, because I mean, I preached from the beginning of like I guess this 2020 this year, like he's going to be in the Darius Garland, Trey Young, like theoretically on ball level defensively. So if there was one coach that could hide it, he made Rick Carlisle made JJ Barea a pretty good defender. Granted, JJ was pesky.
Right.
I mean, he hid Dirk a lot. Like I trust him. I really trust him to bring out the strengths of Terry, especially if Terry buys in.
No, that's a great point. I mean, Carlisle is bar none one of the probably top 5 coaches in the NBA, and if anybody can scheme their way out of deficiencies, it's him. Um, I think before we move on to NBA Draft 2021, we've got to talk about Porzingis a little bit. So look, he played 57 games last year. So it's not like he was hurt all season by any means. He was just kind of hurt at the worst times, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Now, I've been a massive proponent of the fit between Luka and KP as kind of counterpart stars. I think they complement each other incredibly well. I think Porzingis has continued to develop as a floor stretcher and also as a rim protector. We've seen the Mavericks be able to compete at an incredibly high level, basically solely off like the nuclear orbit that is Luka Doncic. But their ceiling is probably capped just a little bit if Porzingis isn't out there because of that just rare, unique combination, again, of floor stretching and rim protection that is super hard to find. So is it oversimplifying things to say that KP's health is the ultimate determinant of this season, or is it a little deeper than that in your mind?
No, I think that's a pretty fair assessment.
Yeah.
Especially in a year where it's supposed to be a bloodbath and it's kind of the race of who can be healthiest. Who knows when he'll be back? I've seen people say he'll be ready for Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen people say MLK Day. So it's a pretty wide range. And he is important, obviously. Like there were games when Luka was out with the ankle injury at the beginning of this calendar year.
Yep.
Where he took over. I want to say it was the Bucks game that he single-handedly he won.
Like he was the guy.
So they need him. Yeah, they need him to do that. And like you said, they complement each other perfectly. But I do think having Porzingis out there is just you have to have him because he's the best defender on the team when you consider how important rim protection is. He just makes it impossible to go near the rim. He can close out pretty well, and obviously the shooting. It's in 3-and-D big men are probably the most rare type of player. I mean, they don't really exist.
Totally. No, I think that's kind of how I've been digesting that whole dynamic in my mind, and was curious if you thought similarly. So I appreciate your perspective on that. I mean, look, there are a lot of cool NBA League Pass teams this year. Luka is appointment television. Like, you just can't miss it. And then like the surrounding roster that they've put together too. I mean, like you said, this year is going to be a war of attrition with health and COVID and all that. I think the Mavericks have done a great job accumulating depth, and can maybe offset a little bit of that with all the ancillary pieces they have. Of course, you can't have injuries to the main guys, but they can withstand a lick or two, I think. Whereas other teams may not be quite as set up to do that. Well, man, you've got terrific Mavs perspective. I appreciate you kind of letting me pick your brain on the season preview. Let's go to the NBA Draft 2021 now. This is probably what people want to hear, anyways. Look, it's early. I think you have to preface any conversation with 2021 as we're still gathering information. These teams and these prospects are going to look completely different in January and February than they do now. But there are still some conclusions to draw, and there's still enough film and data to start having the conversation. So I just kind of wanted to pick your brain, like, two players, lottery-ish range, and feel free to take this wherever you want to. No hard parameters. Just a couple guys that you're super high on that may be kind of pretty early on your way too early board, if that makes sense.
Yeah, man, I want to say Jalen Suggs, but I loved him in the preseason, and then he exploded. So I'm going to keep him out. I really want to say him though because he is just so exciting to watch. As an honorable mention, I would say I'm big on Evan Mobley. Loved him
Yep.
in high school. Absolutely loved how quick he gets off the floor. I'm an absolute sucker for these athletic stretch big men. So I do think he'll be able to stretch the floor. His
I agree.
defense could be improved, especially like in terms of awareness, but his physical tools and everything just they check out. I think at the very least he's a good NBA player. Um, Another one that's in the lottery. The lottery is just really vague this year, I think.
Totally.
Um, Man, I'm honestly having a hard time with this. And I used to think it would be a different Texas guy, but I'm starting to warm up to this guy being in the lottery. I don't even think it's a stretch anymore, which is Kai Jones, just because of how well he started. I thought it would be Greg Brown, but Greg Brown is
Yep.
kind of disappointed. I mean, Kai Jones is everywhere. I liked his physical tool set last year, and I saw him play up front in personal at TCU last year, and it's very rare that there's two guys that have ever wowed me, and they're both Big 12 guys in terms of their like athleticism in person. Him and Ochai Agbaji.
Yep.
Agbaji got his head above the rim. I'd never seen that in person. Kai Jones was doing windmills from almost the free throw line, and it was loud. And I couldn't pick my jaw up. He's a freak athlete. He moves so well on the perimeter. I really do think his jump shot will develop, and obviously like he can score inside because of his lob threat. It's a complete package. Obviously, we need to see what a regression looks like because he started out hot. I want to see what he looks like when he's bad. But for right now, I mean, how can you not be high on him?
Dude, those are two terrific guys to highlight. Went on Rafael Barlow's NBA Dash radio show, and look, I haven't seen the G League Ignite guys yet. I haven't seen the Tennessee guys yet, so I'm still working through this class. But I put Kai Jones in my top 10 watch list, like way too early watch list. We'll see how it shakes out, but I am with you completely. The UNC game, he had a couple plays where he, ripped through on the wing, one dribble pull up, shot fake, take it to the rim, jab step, pull up three. I was just
Oh,
at 6'11", he's essentially a swing man. I saw him a little bit last year, and he caught my fancy here or there, but he looks, and there's always these guys, right? There's always these guys that make massive jumps between their freshman and sophomore year. He seems like a candidate to kind of start to rocket up draft boards. So I love that you're getting out in front of it. And I think people are catching on slowly but surely. Greg Brown, I like too, but I agree with you in the fact that Kai Jones just seems to have a little bit more, at least immediately transferable skills to the NBA. Totally with you on Mobley. I think he's in that top tier right now. Just been incredibly impressed with his skill level. Like you alluded to, he can really pass, and he can handle the ball. I just, watching him, his physical profile mixed with his skills, I don't see how he'll stay out of the top 5. Again, I still have a lot of guys to get to, but that seems like a inevitability. If he keeps on the path he is right now. Nice transition for Abaji. I don't know if you would put him in this range, but I feel like he's a late first round, early second round guy, and this is an early range. That could change. I loved him last year when I was evaluating as Azubuike and Dotson. I thought he was kind of a candidate for a breakout year. He's played really well thus far. Where are you with him? Do you think he's a draftable prospect right now?
Oh yeah. I would take him just because he's so raw, which has always been his story. I mean, when he was a freshman, he was redshirting, and they pushed him through halfway through the season, and he came out pretty hot. It's pretty crazy though, because his jump shot is falling right now. On 5 attempts a game, he's at 46% for the moment, which is obviously going to regress. But the fact that it's actually falling, I feel like that's always been the issue. The form was never bad. The touch was never bad. It's just make or miss kind of thing.
Yep.
And I really do think I would take him in the second round. I think he ends up staying one more year just because he's so raw. But if I were a team, I'd want to be ahead of the curve and get him, because I mean, the athleticism and the shooting combo is it's always coveted in the NBA.
Yeah, he's a freak athlete, and he's impressed me this year with like coming off the pick and coming off a ball screen, dribbling into a pull-up three-pointer. I mean, he made a couple of those in the Kentucky game. I've been really impressed with him. I wouldn't rule out him kind of like creeping into my late first round, but like you said, it's totally possible he just elects to go back to school too. Do you have another guy in that similar, maybe 20 to 40 range? I mean, you can be very liberal here with your prospects. Is there anyone else you'd highlight kind of in that general frame?
So last year I was all in on this guy. I thought he should have come out selfishly because I really wanted him on the Mavs. But now that Mavs don't have a pick, I hope he stays for a junior year, which is Jeremiah Robinson Earl. I'm all in on that guy. I think he just does everything. His jump shot hasn't been falling, but he shot 81% from the line last year. Like same thing with Tugbaji. It's a make or miss game. Like sometimes you just miss a lot, and others you just make. I don't know. There's really no explanation, but like the shot will translate. I think, I pointed this out before. He has an identical jump shot to Maxi Kleber, who was almost 40% for most of the year from 3. And he's a great athlete, really similar players, just Robinson Earl is more skilled. I really just don't know what flaws he has in his game. He's unbelievably intelligent, like one of the smartest players, I think, in the country. I hope he falls to like whatever the Mavs have in the second round if he stays in the draft, selfishly. But I do think that realistically he should be a top 20 pick.
So yeah, that was incredibly well put. I could just like clip that. Jeremiah Robinson Earl, here's the case for why he's so terrific. Because I'm with you completely. People seem to be a little bit down on him defensively, and I get that a little bit from like a lateral standpoint, but I see a lot of switchability. I see him sit down and slide with wings sometimes. Obviously, he's a pretty solid post defender. I don't know if it's just like the way he moves, people aren't quite vibing with him defensively, but I actually think there's a lot more there than he gets credit for currently.
Yeah, his defense you can easily put him 3 through 5, I think, on anybody. Yeah, like he's a great athlete, like vertically as well. It's definitely the aesthetics though. Like it doesn't look pretty, but he does it.
Yep, totally. I'm with you. I don't think, again, like you said, maybe he goes back to school too. Villanova has kind of become a draft factory at this point. Like, come here, even if you're not a highly rated recruit, come here, and within 2 to 3 years, like you're going to be a draftable prospect. They've got just a laundry list of guys who that's been true for them. Virginia has been somewhat similar in that sense. So I agree. I think he's a top 20 prospect, no doubt. He's also just got one of the best, and this is more like niche, whatever. One of the best drive hard, spin back to the opposite side,
Yeah.
finger roll layup. Like that move is basically unstoppable with him.
Oh,
um,
it's nice. It's nice. Sorry.
all right. Do you have any, again, this is early and I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but do you have any like quote unquote sleepers that you've got your eye on right now that maybe aren't quite in the conversation, maybe either as much as they should be, or that you think will kind of reveal themselves to the consensus over the year? Just one or two guys if you've got them.
Yeah, Justin Moore from Villanova,
Oh,
really
yeah.
by the jump shot. He's a big one for me. And then I might have a hometown bias on this one because I'm in Dallas, but I really like Faron Hunt from SMU.
Okay.
Really long, freak athlete. I do think he's the best athlete in the draft. Can put the ball on the floor, can defend pretty much anybody, especially as he adds strength, he'll be able to guard. And I don't think this is stretch 2 through 5. Just incredible upside. And if he can fix his jump shot, which it's very fixable, all he has to do is pretty much keep his guide hand steady. Um, I really like him. I think he's a massive sleeper.
That's awesome, man, because that is a guy I have not been on yet. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on. Guys that I trust their opinions, giving me prospects that I haven't quite dove into yet is perfect. So thanks for that one. Already making a note, and we'll be checking him out soon. All right, last question before we get out of here. Is there a prospect yet, and you may not have a guy yet, but is there anyone that you're not quite buying the hype on? And that doesn't mean that you don't like them necessarily, just maybe that you're less enthralled with than kind of the consensus right now?
Man, is it cheating to say BJ Boston? Is that a cheat answer?
No,
I feel
no.
like,
Let's talk
man,
about him.
I had such high expectations for him as a shot creator and everything, and it just hasn't happened. It hasn't happened, and it's disappointing.
No, I'm with you. I mean, so BJ Boston, obviously he just can't make a shot really right now. He finally made a few against Georgia Tech, but they got beat. You know, he gives you glimpses of like downhill rim attack and kind of float and finish around the rim, which is really impressive, which keeps me optimistic. But if he's not going to make shots, I don't see how he provides a ton of efficient offensive production. And look, he's a massive wing with terrific skill. It just all hasn't come together yet. You know, sometimes these Kentucky guys look awesome after a month and a half. So maybe BJ Boston will get to that point. But I can't say I disagree with you right now. I mean, I'm not giving up on him by any means, but I've got my antennas up a little bit where it's just like, all right, is this shooting gonna come around or not? Because I don't know what else he truly offers right now if he's not a big time scoring offensive wing.
Right,
Yeah.
right. It's hard with the production. The production definitely doesn't do him any favors. Like I'd rather almost see him doing the right things and just missing, than
Yeah.
doing like the wrong stuff and
Yeah.
making. But and obviously, like you said, conference play will come around. I think the biggest thing for him though is, and really almost all of Kentucky, they don't have a point guard. They went from having 3 point guards playing at once last year with Quickly, Higgins, and Maxey to having none. So that's also something to consider as to why some of these guys are underperforming.
No doubt. I think that's a very important point. And I can't tell you how many times I've thought if Ashton Higgins would have came back to school, this Kentucky team would probably look 20 times better than they do right now. Because to your point, they just don't have like an offensive organizer right now. And Ashton Higgins was that in spades. So I would have loved to see him back at UK this year just for their
Yeah.
continuity. Um, Man, this has been incredibly valuable, I think, for the listeners and for myself to get your perspective. I appreciate you taking a little bit of time to come talk to us. Just tell our Which Carolina audience, where they can find you, and how you can kind of direct them to your content.
Yeah, dude, thank you so much for having me. Most of my stuff is always on Twitter at Mavs Draft. Post a good amount to the site, mostly as the draft gets closer, honestly. And then that's where I kind of combine everything from Twitter for the last like 12 months. And then I also host the Mavs Draft Podcast, which is on Spotify and Apple.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I can't recommend you as a Twitter follow enough to everyone, especially if you're an NBA kind of draft head, that's where you need to go, and definitely check out the podcast. So Richard, thanks so much for coming on. Hopefully we can have you back again as 2021 draft kind of consolidates a little bit and we have a little bit more information, and then back to talk some Mavs maybe during the NBA season as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe like a Mavs Hornets preview or something.
There we go. All right. Well, this has been the Which Carolina podcast with @Mavs Draft, Richard Stayman. Thank you all for listening. Take care.